Hi guys, so I wanted to get on and make a voiceover for my art that I've creating here. I've put a time lapse together, and what you can see, what I've just done is start with water. I often do painting with water first. I put a layer of water on, and then I add pigments, and I let it bleed. And through that controlled process, I develop the background first, and then I develop the foreground, and build up using the same techniques with water and pigments and building up different layers. And there's always a process of waiting for it to dry. So the time lapse eliminates all my drying time, obviously, because you don't get to see that stuff. But I add different colors. The background is dry, so the blue will be drying off now, and then I'm adding in all these textures to the front and different colors and building up layers. I wanted to build a coral scene, so we build the structure of the landscape. Just like any painting, you would build a composition which has flow and direction and a shape which draws the eye into the painting. So as I go through the painting and I gradually build up more and more colors, and I'm letting the layers dry, I'm building up more textures and putting contrasting colors on top of dry layers of ink, and then putting in more shade and darkness. And the whole painting process is a building up of light and dark to work against each other to create three-dimensional form and shapes. I particularly love coral because it gives me opportunity to play with colors and textures in a very loose way. It sort of is very open to interpretation. And I wouldn't say I'm drawing anything precisely, but what I want to build up is a layers of texture and layers of shapes and repeating patterns and depth and contrast, which gradually builds up a very colourful and vibrant textured image of my coral paintings. I I loved doing this one. It was fun. I knew I was going to paint fish all over it, so I left the top half of the painting fairly open for coming back to later on in the time lapse to create a swirl of fish swimming over the corals. So I had a very clear idea of what I was painting in this time lapse. It just took me a while to build up all the colours and the depth before I moved on to the fishy stages near the end. At this stage, I was building up more depth in the background. So we've got the corals in the foreground, which are quite bright and vibrant. And then in the background, I put in a new layer of blue over the back cliff that's in the distance, which would give me a better backdrop for the fish swirling over the top. So this was a new layer of blue colour. I used a blue iris ink, which is absolutely gorgeous colour. And then I'm just bringing out the patterns and details in the front. You can see I'm using a different tool here. I've got a glass pen with a very fine tip nib, and it's been handmade, so it's got a twist in the nib. So it holds my watercolor ink brilliantly. And what I do is dip that into my little ink bottles, and then I can, it just is an amazing nib. It lasts for ages, so I can work with the same ink dip for a really long time, and it will continue to make this lovely, fine, thin pen nib line, which I used a dark blue. I think I used Payne's Grey ink to do some of the shadows and the details of the actual coral. I enjoyed using this pen very much. It gave me a new thing to experiment with, and developing the texture within the layers of the painting. And once you get into the fine, darker details, it brings out the crispness of the shadows and the contrast of the coral that I'm painting. I've gone back to using a traditional paintbrush here. I love my sable brushes. They hold the best colour and water for as long as possible. I also love to wait for it to dry and then use pens, and I use metallic pens to highlight some of the details. It's like the opposite of the glass pen black, Payne's grey ink. I use silver and gold pens to make it shiny. This is the next day, and I was obviously doing another layer with some washes over the top to give the background more depth. And I keep coming back to do more details into the coral at different stages to bring out more three-dimensional depth. At this point in the painting, I was coming back to more shadows and more depth in the background and working on the more distant area of the coral in the background. And I used some blue pen and ink to wash more depth and dark recesses into the background. I then began to paint my layer of fish, and I used a white, titanium white, which gave me a proper solid cover, base ground for the fish in the foreground, and then I used a blue ink for the fish more in the distance, showing up against the light. They were dark. I then began to put more layers onto those fish in the background, so I made them a little darker. And then I once the white fish were dry, I put on more colour. I used some pastel colours with some iridescence in it, quite shiny. So when you walk past this painting, it shines at you, and it's very pretty. And all the fish in the front are different colours with a few different layers. After this stage, I then went on to put a few darker layers into the foreground of the fish. But that was getting towards the end of the painting, and I think I finished it. You'll see at the end. Finishing off details here. Just you go back and you tweak things here and there and sharpen stuff up and work corners that you hadn't seen before, and you look at it again and you see something afresh. I keep working on it until I feel like I've pulled it all together so it feels right. Till I've created this abstract, colourful tapestry of paint that all fits together and feels good. I named this Just Keep Swimming. Thanks for watching.